What is good, Raider Nation? The Raiders have made the pick, man. And I'm not gonna lie to you guys, man. I am surprised as hell. What are the Raiders? Look, this is an interesting pick. We're gonna talk about this. This one's very, very, very interesting. Brock Bowers, the Raiders are taking a tight end with the pick. Uh, so many solid offensive linemen available, so many solid corners and D ends and D tackles, and the Raiders are taking a tight end with the first pick. I am shocked as hell. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Um, I'll be the first to tell you guys. I actually like Brock Bowers. I think he's a solid football player. But I think the Raiders had no business taking a tight end. It just doesn't make sense. Right? You already have your weapons on the offensive side of the football. You needed a quarterback that would have probably made a little bit more sense, but we saw a run on quarterbacks. We got 6 guys go. And you could have easily taken Tyler Guyton. Talicia Fuaga was still available. If you didn't like those 2 guys, there was a couple other tackles available. Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold. Dallas Turner is going to be a game wrecker. He was available, and the Raiders take a tight end. Holy shit. What the fuck are the Las Vegas Raiders doing? This one just doesn't make sense. This is a massive, massive, massive head scratcher. I'm not at the point anymore where I'm gonna sugarcoat things and tell you guys that I think it's a great pick. I think the Raiders have failed in the first round. I think the Raiders have made a massive, massive, massive mistake. To me, this is pretty. I want to be careful here, right? Brock Bowers isn't Alex Leatherwood, right? That's not the right way to describe this. Because Brock Bowers is going to be a very, very good football player. He'll be one of the best tight ends in the NFL for the entirety of his career. But he's a tight end at the end of the day, and we drafted a tight end last year in Michael Mayer, who also looked pretty damn solid, right? And here we are now taking Brock Bowers, a tight end. This is crazy to me. I'm going to go through some of your guys' comments. I want to hear what you guys think about this pick. Some people are saying maybe he doesn't play tight end. I doubt it. He's going to play tight end. There's no way you're going to line up Brock Bowers anywhere outside of a tight end. To me, this one just doesn't make sense at all, man. Jim Z said, dude is a beast. Top 5 player. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think Brock Bowers is one of the best players in this class. Michael Miller said F. I don't think Brock Bowers is a terrible football player. I don't think that's the case. I just think the Raiders didn't need a tight end, right? The Raiders had no business drafting a tight end. We have legit needs. Your offensive line is your offensive line is the most important position, especially those offensive tackles. And to me, taking a tight end just doesn't make sense. I am very, very, very disappointed. Molly Mao, shout out to you, brother. I hope everything's going well with you. You said, I don't even think he was the best available player. I agree with that. Honestly, I don't think Michael Mayer was by any means the best available player at that point. And yet, here it is. The Raiders are taking Georgia tight end Brock Bowers. I'm shocked, man. I am legitly shocked. The Saints have also picked now at this point, and they're doing right. They took a tackle in Talicia Fuaga. Right, that's what the Raiders needed right there. They needed a guy that's physical, a guy that wants to beat your ass, and yet we did not do that. I mean, I'm gonna just say it what it is. It's a terrible pick. Tom Telesco has absolutely sucked in his very first pick for the Raiders. I think it's just a terrible pick. To me, the thing with it is Michael Mayer is going to be a good tight end. You can already see that on his tape. The guy's a playmaker. The guy can make catches. He's a good route runner. He's big. What do you do with 2 tight ends? Right? Let's just be honest. What do you do with 2 tight ends? If you're the Las Vegas Raiders, how do you not only get 2 tight ends involved, but you have Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers. You got Trey Tucker in the slot. What do you do with 2 tight ends? It just doesn't make sense to me. Right? And on top of that, now both of these guys are going to one day have to get contracts. And if both Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers are top 10 tight ends, which I think they will be, are you going to pay 2 tight ends and make them, the highest paid players at the position? So I don't know. To me, it doesn't make sense at all. I think this was an absolute terrible pick. Again, and that's not me saying that Brock Bowers is a bad football player. I'm not saying that at all. Brock Bowers is an absolute stud, right? Brock Bowers is going to be a very, very good tight end in the NFL. But the Raiders don't have a need at tight end. We took Michael Mayer in the 2nd round last year, right? When you take And I see a comment here where someone's saying Mayer is a backup Sanjit. Mayer ain't top 10. That's just not true at all, right? Michael Mayer is not a backup tight end. Uh, Hoops is saying your eyes look a bit water. I was crying, man. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm just kidding. I have my contacts in, so um, someone said, Jason Billy said, I like the pick. At least we know he's not going to be a complete bust. And I agree with that. I don't think it's the fact that it's going to be a bust. I think and it's not even a reach, right? To say, it wasn't necessarily a reach. The issue is the Raiders don't need a tight end. Let's just be honest. How many tight ends have won Super Bowls, right? How many tight ends have actually impacted the game so much where they've actually been the ones to win, right? And don't tell me Travis Kelce, because at the end of the day, Travis Kelce didn't do anything until Patrick Mahomes got there, right? How many tight ends have actually won their teams to Super Bowl? It doesn't happen, right? But you can make the argument that a right tackle is going to impact your team so much that you won't win a Super Bowl, right? To me, this was a really, really bad pick. I will not agree with it. And I'll be honest, I didn't agree with the Michael Mayer pick last year either. I think tight ends don't really matter all that much, right? You can either have a great tight end or you can have a great wide receiver. It really doesn't matter, right? What matters is your offensive line going to be able to hold up, right? And I'll be the first to tell you guys, it just doesn't make sense to me. Now, did the Raiders take the approach where they said, hey, we're going to 100% go with the best player available approach? That may make sense. Brock Bowers could have definitely been the best player available on the board. But at the end of the day, is he what the Raiders needed, right? Is Brock Bowers and Talicia Fuaga going to be such different with their outcomes? I don't think so. Honestly, I think Talicia Fuaga is going to be just as good of a offensive tackle as Brock Bowers will be a tight end, right? So to me, the pick just didn't make sense. I understand that you had multiple quarterbacks get taken. From my understanding, the Raiders were trying to trade up with the Jets. They're trying to get in front of the Vikings to get either JJ McCarthy or Bo Nix. And apparently that's why the Vikings went ahead and made that swap with the Jets. That could have made sense, but regardless, I'm fine with not taking a quarterback. I don't even think that was a big deal, to be honest with you guys. I just think the big issue here is that you're taking a tight end when a tight end doesn't matter all that much. Shout out to Jose Lopez for the first super chat. One of the ways to support these videos is via super chats. You guys know this. A lot of my videos, especially the film ones, get demonetized. So when I go live, I always appreciate the super chat. So thank you, Jose. He said, new front office, same absurd decisions, shaking my head. I couldn't disagree with what you're saying, man. It just doesn't make sense. We crushed the John Gruden, Mike Mayock regime. We crushed Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler. We crushed these guys because they didn't take the proper guys in the first round. They didn't take the guys that made the most sense, right? Because at the end of the day, I know, the best player available strategy makes sense. And I'm not disagreeing with that. BPA definitely makes sense. But you got to keep in mind, right tackle makes more sense, especially when you consider that we have a need there, right? You have to factor in need, right? And teams do, right? That's why Bo Nix was the 12th overall pick, right? There's a reason why he was the 12th overall pick. To me, quarterbacks matter. That's why you take a quarterback before Brock Bowers. An offensive tackle is a lot more valuable than a tight end, and that's why the Raiders should have taken an offensive tackle, right? And it's going to be interesting because now we already got Talicia Fuaga off the board. We'll see what happens the rest of this draft. More than half the draft is remaining. The Raiders probably aren't going to trade back up into the first round. I think at this point, the Raiders are going to end up waiting until tomorrow's pick. I think it's pick 44. And that's when they'll probably end up taking a tackle. And at that point, I hope that we have Tyler Guyton or one of these other tackles available. Right? I do hope that we have a top-tier tackle available at that point. I think skipping out on Talicia Fuaga is going to be such a big mistake. I think we're going to look back at this decision in 5 years and say the Raiders should have gotten themselves a right tackle. I think Fuaga's going to become an all-pro guy. I think Tyler Guyton will become an all-pro guy. There's a couple other guys available as well. But, it is what it is at this point, I guess. Shout out to you. It's Explicit G said, I'm sick. You had the pick of the litter on defense and offensive tackle, which just doesn't make sense. And that's the frustrating part for me. When you really think about this, we could have taken Dallas Turner. Dallas Turner is going to be a game changer, right? Obviously, we understand the positional value of things, so he hasn't been picked yet, right? You got 6 quarterbacks taken. You had, I think, 2 offensive tackles at that point taken, receivers. Those positions matter just as much as the defensive end. But we're getting to the point where the Raiders could have taken their defensive end, Dallas Turner, Jared Burst, Latu, who's a Vegas native, I believe. They could have taken Byron Murphy Jr., the D tackle, right? Number 1 D tackle. We could have taken a right tackle. Fuaga, Guyton both made perfect sense for the Raiders. And here we are trading, or here we are taking a tight end, right? To me, it just does not make a ton of sense. Again, I'm not disappointed that we took the best tight end available in this class. I'm disappointed we didn't fill a void, right? Which was the right tackle position and even the quarterback position, right? We should have jumped the Vikings possibly and taken McCarthy, but again, that apparently didn't work out. The Jets went ahead and traded that pick. Shout out to you guys for the super chats. Omar, shout out to you. Said Sanjit, I'm disappointed on the pick. Raiders will always be Raiders. LOL. Will always be a joke. Doesn't matter the time and place. It's the owner at this point. I really don't even know like what it is that where the Raiders are consistently taking guys that just don't make sense, right? And with that, I see right now so the Colts went ahead and took Latu out of UCLA, solid football player. I was on the Max Crosby podcast, very good pass rusher. But yeah, just kind of getting back to the super chat. I don't even know what it is at this point when you guys think about it. Like, are the Raiders cursed? Because like it's different regimes, and I almost feel like, since like 2019, if we just took the obvious pick, Josh Allen over Cleveland Farrell, the year after CeeDee Lamb over Henry Ruggs, the year after Christian Darrisaw over Alex Leatherwood. If we just took the obvious picks, the Raiders would be so much better. And today's one of those same type of days. If we just took the obvious pick, we would have been better, right? And I'm not saying Brock Bowers is going to be a bad football player. He's a great tight end. But again, it just doesn't make sense. We have a need at right tackle, and your right tackle is going to make such a bigger impact for you than your tight end will. And we already have a tight end. We spent a second-round pick on him last year. Steven, shout out to you, said solid tight end, but not a need. Offensive tackle, DB, our needs. Drug test to let's go right now. I agree with you, man. BPA versus need is not always best player available over need. It doesn't work like that. You got to weigh both options. Of course, you're not going to reach for a need if a different guy's a lot better. But it just doesn't make sense to me why you would take a tight end when tight ends don't matter all that much, right? It just doesn't impact the game as much. Shout out to you, Steven. Really, really, really appreciate it. I could not agree more. We could have had whichever DB, Quinyon Mitchell's there. We could have had whichever DN or D tackle. Two Stocks said, I love this pick. Eat your heart out, Raider Nation. Shout out to you, man. I'm glad you love this pick. I definitely cannot agree with it. John Smith says, Sanjit definitely smoked the bull before this stream. I did not. I could not work had I smoked anything prior to this. I would not be able to work, right? I'm not the type of person that could smoke and then come up here and talk to you guys. I just can't. Shout out to you for the comment, as always, appreciated. Shout out to my brother Raid the Tape. He said build the trenches. We missed out. Fact, man. We really, really missed out on this one. I don't care what anybody says. It just does not make sense. It really just does not make sense. Miguel Navarro, shout out to you to Sanjit, or disappointed Sanjit, but let's see how it goes. Everything could turn out fine. And that is a good point. We could always end up getting to the point where, maybe Tyler Guyton does fall and then we trade up in the second round and take him. Maybe Terrion Arnold doesn't come in the first round and then we come and take him, right? Maybe we end up trading up in the first round and we get our right tackle and then things do work out, right? Maybe we draft the right tackle in the third round and it ends up being just some random guy, Kingsley Sumaitai or one of these other guys, and it ends up working out as well, right? We'll see how it kind of ends up. But I do definitely think that the Raiders should have taken Talvisia Fuaga or Tyler Guyton with that pick. If not, they could have possibly traded up for a quarterback. But we're now at the point where the Raiders will most likely be going into the season with either AOC or Gardner Minshew as their quarterbacks. We'll see what ends up happening, right? We'll really, really see what ends up happening. But it looks like that's kind of what the Raiders will be going into the season with. There are some quarterbacks that they could technically trade for, which I don't think it makes sense. But I know other people have mentioned it. There's Dak Prescott, there's Ryan Tannehill, there's a couple other quarterbacks. But at this point, that doesn't really make sense to me. I think you can just, at this point, let AOC and Gardner Minshew battle it out, go into the season with those two guys, and then look forward to a quarterback in next year's draft, assuming those two guys don't work out. I think that's the only thing that's logical at this point. But I do hope everything does, hopefully come back. Mario, shout out to you, said Fuaga was your guy. We have to accept and roll with Bowers. Let's go, Raider Nation for life. I 100% agree with you, man. I could not disagree with what you're saying. We definitely have to consider the fact that we made the pick. We got to move forward with it, right? But I guess for now we can kind of be disappointed. We'll take an hour to be disappointed. And then we'll bounce back probably by tomorrow. I'll be happy with the pick, but I just can't agree with it right now, right? I just can't agree with the fact that we skipped out on one of the best right tackles in this class. I wanted Olu Fashanu. You guys all know that, but he ended up getting picked, I believe, by the Jets at pick 11. And outside of him, I was cool with Fuaga, who's a mauler, and Tyler Guyton as well. And Guyton is still technically available, but I don't see Guyton getting past the Eagles or the Steelers. I think one of those two teams is going to end up taking Guyton. But it'll be interesting. We'll see what ends up happening. Obviously, we'll be doing a Michael Mayer. We'll be doing a Brock Bowers giveaway, jersey giveaway. So stay tuned for that. I'll probably do that on Twitter, but I may do one through YouTube. YouTube's a little bit harder. I may have to collect emails and do those type of things, but we'll figure that out for YouTube as well. Christian said Raiders should have taken Arnold. New staff, same bullshit. Fact. I agree with it. Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, I'm not sure exactly who's the better of the corners. I personally have watched both of their tapes. I think both guys are going to be really good football players. Arnold may not be a lockdown corner necessarily, at least right away, but I think the thing with Arnold is he's kind of reminds me of Nate Hobbs, where he's smart. They punch the ball out. They get after it together. And I think with that, the Raiders could have definitely used another guy like that. Mitchell, on the other hand, would have been the pick for me if we went corner, but I guess the Raiders want to continue to just kind of invest on the offensive side. I do think it'll be interesting to see how Michael Mayer, how his role kind of changes now that we got Bowers, because you can go in the two tight end sets and you can do all that, but at the end of the day, like, two tight ends means you're going to be a slower paced offense. Are we going to run the football? Because our offensive line is not built to run the football. Our running backs are not very good. Okay, so then are we going to throw the football? Well, we don't really have a quarterback, so I don't really know how this is all going to work out, but it is what it is. We'll see what ends up happening. Shout out to you, Christian. Mystic makes a great point here. He says, Telesco don't respect Pierce's decisions. I don't know if that's fact, right? I don't know if that's 100% fact. In my opinion, I think Tom Telesco is 100% in charge. I know in the past regimes, I think last year, I do think Dave Ziegler was pretty much 100% in charge, but we know before that, John Gruden had a lot of say. But I don't think that's the case anymore. To me, Tom Telesco is 100% in charge. And I do think Telesco wanted to get a quarterback. I do think Tom Telesco wanted to trade up and possibly get a quarterback. But the thing is I guess none of the teams wanted to trade up. We found out why the Falcons didn't want to trade down. Obviously, they wanted Michael Penix Jr. The Chargers, I guess, wanted their tackle, so they wouldn't have probably traded down either. And then, of course, with the Jets, the Raiders apparently spoke to the Jets. I don't know if that's 100% confirmed, but I did see those reports. And the Jets went ahead and took the best offer, which was they swapped picks, obviously. And on top of that, they got a 4th and a 5th round pick. So that's kind of what they ended up getting. It is what it is. Shout out to you, Mystic, for the comment. We are all one. Said Sanji, you're overthinking this pick. This tight end is going to help the O-line. It's debatable. That's very, very, very debatable, because at the end of the day, if you want a tight end that can block, just take a tackle, right? We shouldn't be at the point where a tight end has to help the offensive line should be able to 5-man pass block. They should be able to 5-man pass protect. They shouldn't have to rely on tight ends helping them. Your offensive line should be good enough to be able to handle it 5 versus 4. The Raiders aren't there. The Raiders offensive line struggles 5 versus 4. So we are going to need multiple tight ends to help, right? So I guess in that instance, it makes sense, right? Brock Bowers will help the right tackle whoever it ends up being. Um, I don't know. It is what it is. The Raiders have already made the pick. So, we can't look back at it at this point. And I see that the Seahawks have also made their picks. So the Seahawks are taking defensive tackle Byron Murphy the second. Love the pick by the Seahawks to take the Texas defensive tackle. I see a lot of the comments. I see a lot of people have mixed feelings. I see a lot of people are disappointed, and I see the occasional person that's kind of supporting it. And I will get behind the pick and I will support it, but today's not that day. To me, you should have taken the right tackle that was available to you. You should have taken the corner or the D end or the D tackle, right? It just doesn't make sense, right? It just doesn't make sense. Misty, shout out to you, Sid. But there will still be really good offense tackles and cornerbacks at 44. Have faith, Raider Nation. And that's the best case scenario for the Raiders. Let's just be honest. If the Raiders are able to get that offensive tackle at pick 44, then that's great. But which offensive tackle is that going to be, right? Are we going to end up taking Kieran out of Yale, right? The left tackle out of Yale. That's a developmental guy, in my opinion. Maybe Blake Fisher at pick 44. I'd be okay with that one. Tyler Guyton, I don't think is going to be there. So it's going to be interesting. Maybe it's Caden Wallace. We'll see what ends up happening. I do think there's some good right tackle or offense tackle options. So I wouldn't be mad if the Raiders did, end up taking that in the second round. I think that's probably going to be what's going to end up happening. But the Raiders obviously took the tight end here. I know a lot of people are disagreeing. Shout out to all the super chatters. I really, really, really appreciate it. Kikaha Raider said, I'm okay with the pick, but wish we got an offensive tackle or corner. Always a shocker with our picks. And that is the thing, right? It never seems, to me at least, the picks are always shocking, right? We can never just take the guy, the Chargers take Joe Alt. The Jets take Olu Fashanu. The Seahawks take Byron Murphy. The Colts take Latu. Those are just like obvious picks, like to take these guys. And the Raiders go with like the pick you don't expect. Like, I don't think anyone mocked the Raiders taking a tight end, right? I watched enough tape last year of Michael Mayer where you could have watched his tape and you could have said this guy has the potential to become a really, really, really solid offensive tight end in the NFL, which means the Raiders should have taken an offensive lineman, right? I think that's what would have probably made sense for us. So it's always a shocker when you take a guy that no one had projected going to the Raiders. Kikaka Raider also says sounded like Bowers maybe tight end. Definitely tight end one. I think if you take a guy in the first round with the new regime, and I think that's the big thing, definitely going to be tight end one, in my opinion. Sacktown Pete, shout out to my brother Sacktown Pete. Said, great work, Sanjit. Raiders needed a Mitchell. I agree with that, man. The Raiders should have taken Quinyon Mitchell. But the cornerback class is kind of weak. I guess, we haven't seen a cornerback get taken yet. We'll see which team does take a cornerback and at what point, right? The cornerback class was always kind of weak. I thought Mitchell would have ended up going top 15 to someone, but the fact that we had that run on quarterbacks, it kind of makes sense. And, I'll also say this. I think we're at the point now where every other team that needed a quarterback got a quarterback, right? There was the Raiders and basically 6 other teams that needed quarterbacks. Those 6 teams all got their quarterbacks. So what's going to happen is next year, if the Raiders aren't able to, have success with the quarterbacks we have, what that means is next year there'll probably be about 3 teams that are going to be looking to get quarterbacks. So if next year's class is just as good as this year's class, which it is projected to be a legit class, that means the Raiders won't have to necessarily, let's trade up to the 3rd pick or the 2nd pick or whatever, right? Even if we end up with 10, 11, or 12 picks, or the 10th, 11th, or 12th pick, we don't have to trade all that far up because other teams already have quarterbacks, right? 6 quarterbacks got taken this year. Chances are those 6 teams are all going to kind of suck, right? Because they have rookie quarterbacks. And they're not going to all look to get a quarterback next year, right? So for the Raiders, I guess it does benefit us in that aspect. I think every team in the NFL at this point has a quarterback that they're invested in. They have a young quarterback that I think they can kind of look forward to just kind of rolling with. But we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. Shout out to you, Sacktown Pete. Omar, shout out to you for the 2nd super chat of the day. I said, bro, we don't have a quarterback. Anyone saying otherwise is delusional. Fuaga was MT Jalen Carter this year. And again, we fucked it up. I agree with it. I'm not going to disagree with that, man. I 100% agree with you. Last year, we made a massive mistake not taking Jalen Carter. We should have taken Jalen Carter. He was right there in front of us. That would have been the right pick. And we didn't take Jalen Carter last year. And I think when you look at it in that aspect, now we have Tyree Wilson, right, as opposed to Jalen Carter. We have Tyree Wilson, who did not work out last year. We'll see if he can bounce back in his second season. But I'll be honest with you guys, um, the idea of getting these big, massive, powerful, strong guys hasn't worked. It was Jordan Davis, I think, 2 years ago. It was, I'm sorry, about 3 years ago was Jordan Davis. 2 years ago was Trayvon Walker. And then last year was Tyree Wilson, right? These teams were like, get these big, massive, strong guys that are unblockable. None of them have worked out. Jordan Davis doesn't look good. Trayvon Walker doesn't look good. And we'll see if Tyree Wilson can ultimately pan out. But we could have taken Jalen Carter last year, who I think is probably already a top 10 defensive tackle, right? But now the Raiders will be kind of going forward. We obviously got a D tackle, so it doesn't matter. But we still need a right tackle now, right? So we kind of made that same decision where we ultimately ended up skipping out on that, right? So yeah, it's going to be interesting how the Raiders move forward. It'll be interesting, maybe the Raiders move Michael Mayer. Like what are the chances we trade him away? Because I just find it hard to believe that you're going to have enough packages to bring in multiple tight ends, right? Because think about it like this too, we have Trey Tucker, who we have plans for, right? We have multiple, we have the thought process with Trey Tucker that, hey, this guy is going to end up being, hopefully the next Tyreek Hill. Hopefully he becomes an absolute playmaker. And how is that going to happen if we have two tight ends on the field, right? Because if you have two tight ends on the field, one of your wide receivers has to come off. And that's going to be Trey Tucker, right? Because Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers are always going to be on the field. Well, let's say you keep Trey Tucker on the field because he has that speed. Well, then what? Now you're taking Jacoby Myers or Devontae Adams off, right? So to me, it just doesn't make sense in that aspect, right? So it's going to be interesting how we kind of move forward. It's going to be really, really interesting. I do, if there's one thing going for the Raiders this year, I do think that, we did a pretty solid job building the defense, right? We did a pretty solid job building the defense. We're able to get guys, we went out and got the best defensive tackle. That was a free agent. We re-signed all the players we needed to re-sign. And we found Jack Jones. I think Jack Jones is a solid football player as well, right? We got a top 5 player. I agree with that. Definitely agree with that. I see a comment here by Rob. He's saying, I'm smiling. I don't know if that's good or bad. I also see that the Vikings traded up, and the Vikings are taking Dallas Turner with the 17th overall pick. I think Dallas Turner is a phenomenal pickup. I think Dallas Turner is who the Raiders could have possibly taken if it feels one of those surprise picks. But we'll see what ends up happening. Shout out to you, Cedric. Sanjit, what did I tell you? Yeah, man, it always seems to me like, the Raiders just don't do the obvious thing of what they should do, right? Yogi said, how's Bowers? What grade do you give him? I think Bowers is a good football player. I honestly do think he's a really, really good football player. He's definitely the best tight end in this class. But we don't need that, right? So with that, we don't need a tight end. And in that instance, I give it a really, really low grade. I'll give it a D minus. To me, it just doesn't make sense, right? Kikaha Raider said, you think we pick up a quarterback tomorrow or go offensive tackle? I think we have to go tackle. I would have taken Bo Nix at pick 13 and been very, very happy. I would have taken J.J. McCarthy at pick 13 and been very, very happy. I would have been fine with any of the 6 quarterbacks in this class, and I would have been very, very happy. But I would not be happy with the 7th quarterback, which is Spencer Rattler. To me, he's not it. I'm not taking Spencer Rattler, honestly. That's not the guy that I would want. You take him with this. If the Raiders take Spencer Rattler with pick 44 tomorrow, I will, for the rest of my life, be calling for Tom Telesco to be fired. Straight up, I will be calling for him to be fired. Especially if guys like Tyler Guyton or one of these top-tier tackles that are still out there are available at that point. Maybe it's like Jackson Powers Johnson that's available. We skip out on him. I'd be very, very, very disappointed at that point. But I do hope that the Raiders can still get a tackle because it's a need, right? Let's just be honest. Thayer Munford is not a tackle. He's not a starting caliber tackle. We've seen him now for 2 years. He just doesn't have it, right? When you look at Thayer Munford, he struggles. 5-man protections when he has to get in space and be true one-on-one situations. When he doesn't have running backs and tight ends helping him, he struggles. And we can, we looked at the tape multiple times on this channel. And maybe after the draft, assuming the Raiders don't get a tackle, maybe we'll go back and I'll create a longer film breakdown of that. I know I talked about it in a different video, but to me, when I look at the Raiders, you got to get a right tackle because Munford's not it. Now, maybe Dalton Wagner has something to offer, but even then, that's kind of risky going into the season with just Munford and just Dalton Wagner, right? If you want to have success, you got to make sure to protect the quarterback. Last year, our offensive line was bad, right? It was really, really bad in my opinion. I see that with the 18th overall pick, the Bengals are taking Georgia offensive tackle Amarius Mims. That's another interesting pick. I'm not a big fan on Mims, but some people like his upside. Mr. Marty Mart said Tyree is working with Max. I did see some pictures posted. Tyree Wilson's arms looked massive in those pictures. I did see that he's working out with Max Crosby. It'd be interesting to see if Tyree Wilson can develop the hand-to-hand pass rush technique. I think that's like the big thing that Tyree Wilson really struggles with, right? Is can he get after the quarterback using his pass rush technique? Can he explode out of his stance? Is he quick with that first step? Because he's lacking in all of that based off his rookie tape. And I don't think it makes sense to move Tyree to the inside, right? He wasn't drafted as a defensive end. Tyree Wilson was drafted as he was drafted as defensive end, not as a defensive tackle, right? So my hope is that we end up keeping Tyree at DN and he works out, right? Some people are saying move him to wide receiver. I'm not sure if you're talking about Michael Mayer or if you're talking about I'm not sure if you're talking about Michael Mayer or if you're talking about Bowers, but yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. Alex, shout out to you. Said we took the best player available, and now we have the best tight end duo. I mean, that's a good point. I don't disagree with that, right? I don't disagree with the fact that the Raiders have the best tight end duo in the NFL, right? I agree with that. I just don't think tight ends matter all that much, right? And I'll stick with that. You can have the best tight end duo, but you need a right tackle to protect your quarterback. And right now, we don't have a right tackle. We don't have a quarterback, right? So regardless of having these playmakers, we saw it last year. We have, we at the moment have one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And it doesn't matter all that much, right? Without having a great quarterback. Now, I understand that maybe, the guys we're getting this year is to really allow these guys to develop for next year. And maybe next year we're going to go out and get a rookie quarterback. And then the hope is that these guys that we've kind of drafted, it's kind of for those guys, or it's to kind of help those guys. But I still think the right pick would have been a right tackle, right? The Saints went out and got Talisia Fuaga right after us. I think that was a great pick for the Saints. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. It's definitely very, very interesting what the Raiders ended up doing. Robert says Spencer Rattler or Jordan Travis or Joe Milton or Michael Pratt. But personally, I want Jordan Travis the most. Travis definitely has some good tape. I'm just not sure what the upside is going to be with Travis. And of course, that's for all these quarterbacks, right? We don't know where Spencer Rattler is going to end up being, Milton or Pratt or Travis. I think the big thing with some of these quarterbacks is if you're going to take some of these quarterbacks, you got to be able to develop them, right? And is Luke Getsy going to be able to develop them? Is Luke Getsy going to get these tight ends that we have now? Is he going to put them in the best position to ultimately win? Right. So I think that's going to be the interesting thing as we kind of go forward. Can our offensive coach get the most out of these guys? Another interesting thing is I was looking at some of the stats that Brock Bowers had, and statistically, he was kind of whatever. Now I know I understand tight ends, especially in college, it's kind of iffy. Their quarterbacks aren't generally that good. He's only played 3 years in college, 21, 22, 23. He's young as hell, so 6'4", 230. It's going to be interesting, man. I'm very, very excited for the Raiders as we go forward, but I don't know. I just think the Raiders have to make sure they get, I think the Raiders got to make sure they get their tackle. As we go into this draft into the second round, you got to get that tackle. Arch Stanton said, I like the pick. He'll play in the slot. He will be our answer to Kelsey after Kelsey is gone. He's a yak receiver, hard to cover. AOC can throw the short pass as well. I like the pick. It'll be interesting, man. It'll definitely be interesting. How much offense is too much offense? right? Like at some point, you got to get that quarterback to actually get them the ball. And maybe AOC is the guy, maybe he develops. And if it's not AOC, maybe it's Gardner Minshew. But you also need a right tackle to go up and hold up on that side of the offensive line, right? And I think for the Raiders, this can be the big question: who's that right tackle, right? Because I agree with Cedric. He's saying we needed a right tackle. 100% agree with that. Bill Revete says Gronk. I agree with that. Brock Bowers, superstar tight end. Let's not overlook that fact. He's going to be a great tight end in the NFL. But again, how many Super Bowls have tight ends won, right? And I'm not talking about quarterbacks that elevated their tight ends. I'm talking about true tight ends that have won Super Bowls. So to me, it's kind of debatable still. Shout out to my brother Raider Tyree. He said, taking a best player available is meant for teams who don't have urgent needs. We definitely needed an offensive tackle and didn't take advantage of our pick. BPA was not the time and place that you fact. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. If the best player available, when pick 3 comes around is the wide receiver, but you need a quarterback, you're going to take that quarterback, right? And that's what the Patriots did with Drake May. Bo Nix and even Michael Penix and even JJ McCarthy, people are saying they're like second round prospects, but they're quarterbacks, right? There is a positional, it's a valued position, right? An offensive tackle is also a valued position. And that's why teams take offensive tackles where they take them. Amarius Mims not that good, but the Bengals took him with pick 18 because you need tackles, right? And I think it's the same thing could be said with the tight end. It's not a position of value. Tight ends just don't matter, right? They don't matter. And to me, if you're the Las Vegas Raiders, you had the opportunity right now to get yourselves a fantastic tackle of the future. And it's also interesting because Tom Telesco has never done what he just did, right? He's never taking a tight end in the first round over an offensive lineman. And maybe his approach is the fact that maybe there's so many tackles, maybe we can trade back up possibly. And if the Raiders do trade back up, I'll hop right back on and we'll go live. But I'm gonna just leave this with some final thoughts here. I don't hate Brock Bowers. I don't think he's a shitty football player. He's obviously the best tight end. He's one of the better weapons coming out of this class. But as we've all discussed now multiple times, it just didn't make sense for the Raiders. Tight ends don't win you football games. What wins you football games is going to be quarterbacks. It's going to be tackles that protect your quarterbacks. The right way to win, especially, taking a tight end if you're a team that, is picking in like, the bottom third of the draft because you're a playoff caliber team makes sense. If the Texans or, if the Bills took Brock Bowers, that makes sense. But for the Raiders, when you have needs at corner, when you have a need at tackle, it does not make sense, right? And my opinion on that will not change, right? And I will stick with that. I was very critical last year of the Michael Mayer pick because I said, hey, tight ends take a year or two to develop. What's the point of taking a tight end when there are a bunch of other guys you could have had? And I'm going to stick with that with this as well. My opinion will not change. That'll be my opinion as we go forward. I appreciate all of you guys as always. I'm going to hop off the live. And I'm going to get some more content out, so stay tuned for that. I'll probably do a Brock Bowers film breakdown here soon. Turn on notifications. Leave a comment below. I want to know what you guys actually think about this pick. Let me know what you guys think, man. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.